Let's get going with Resochord. Resochord is an effect that was included in the Electronic Instruments Volume 2 expansion, and so you can find it under Factory Content, Ensembles, Electronic Instruments Volume 2, and Resochord down here at the bottom. It is an effect, which means that it doesn't produce sound on its own, but what it does do is very cool, and that's to imprint harmonic structures onto any sound that you feed into it. So say, for example, you feed a percussion or a drum sound, something that doesn't have a lot of melodic or timbral content going on. It will take it and lay this kind of chordal texture over it. And it's a very useful effect in genres like house, where you're constantly using these kinds of melodic stab sounds. But it's also very cool to use with something like ambient. You can feed a drone sound into Resochord and have it lay this rich chordal texture on top of it. And so the sky's the limit in terms of the uses for this, but it has been a little bit frustrating for users just because there are a variety of ways to control it, and it's a little finicky to hook up. But we'll get into all that. So what we'll do next is just give you a brief description of how Resochord works, and then we'll kind of take a tour of the interface so you understand all these controls, and then of course we'll get into some applications both within Reaktor and in Ableton Live and a general sequencer setting. Alright, so before going further, I want to show you how to get some sound out of this to get you interested and thinking about what the possibilities are. So when we load the Resochord ensemble and we go into the structure view, and you can do that either by clicking on the structure tab here or by simply double clicking on this black part outside of the instrument panel itself. We come into the structure and we see that it really consists of three things, right? We have a couple of ins, we have the Resochord effect, and we have a couple of outs. What we don't have is anything that's producing sound in this ensemble. And so we want to bring in something that will act as a signal source for Resochord. And what I would like to use is in Electronic Instruments Volume 1, it's this Rhythm Maker ensemble. It's a really cool drum machine, very flexible and very useful. So I'm going to click and drag this in, and then I'm also going to click and drag over these ins to get rid of them. Now I have them selected, and I'm just going to delete them. I'm going to bring Rhythm Maker up here and click on this out and drag it over to the left in on Resochord, and do the same for the right in. And now these two are hooked up, and now if I go back up to my panel view by clicking on the panel and the breadcrumb trail, you'll see that Resochord is here at top, and we have Rhythm Maker down here below. Right, so now Rhythm Maker consists of kind of these separate units. The first is the sequencer, and then the individual sounds that you hear, the kick, percussion, snare, toms, and so forth. Now, this is a little finicky the way it loads. I mean, sometimes it'll load in perfect order. If you load Rhythm Maker by itself, it will load with a sequencer at the top, basically the exact opposite of how it's loaded here. And then other times it will load with the instrument panels trailing off to the right. So it's just kind of, it seems to be luck of the draw. But we have it loaded more or less properly for this. So what I'm going to do is come over here to Resochord and pull down this dry wet knob. And this determines the level of the Resochord effect. If I have it selected all the way at dry, you're not going to hear Resochord at all. And I want you to just hear how Rhythm Maker sounds, and then we'll bring in the Resochord effect. So I'm going to press play to get Rhythm Maker going. So that's just the first snapshot in Rhythm Maker. Now as I bring up this wet value, you'll start to hear the chordal sound come in. So you can start to hear the possibilities, right? It's added this kind of lush texture, and it's really kind of this hypnotic sound. Now, of course, there are so many controls here that you really have a lot of flexibility. And the other thing that's cool is that you can switch between these chord sounds. So you can actually kind of put together chord progressions within Resochord. But before we do that, we're going to go through the interface and kind of explain exactly how these work. Kind of just picking up different things along our way, trying to keep from overwhelming you with information and keep you interested in how this works. But at least now you know how to hook this up, and you can do this, of course, with anything that produces sound. Bring it in and hook it up to Resochord. I find in general that you want to use kind of the drum type stuff, because if you have something that already has harmonic content in it and you're adding more, it can become a little bit much. So let's go into the interface and start exploring.